Black CEO denied first-class seat 12 minutes later. He grounded the jet and fired everyone on board. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel is losing traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can help us. It's quick, free, and allows us to continue bringing you great content. Your support means everything. Let's keep this channel growing collectively. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to the story. You don't belong here. The words cracked through the air, like glass shattering against metal. Every conversation in the cabin stopped mid-sentence. Champagne glasses froze mid-lift. The hum of the jet engines seemed to fade as silence took control. The speaker, a blonde first officer in a crisp white uniform, stood rigid, finger-pointed. Her voice carried the sharp authority of someone who'd mistaken prejudice for professionalism. "Sir," I said, "step back. This area is reserved for first-class passengers only." The man she was yelling at didn't move. He was tall, about 60, dressed simply pale blue shirt, charcoal slacks, a quiet dignity about him. The kind of man most would overlook until it was too late. He didn't flinch, didn't blink. He simply looked at her, calm as marble. Behind her, several passengers exchanged smirks. One man in a navy suit muttered, "Probably wandered in from economy." Another chuckled, shaking his head. The laughter spread softly, the kind that feeds on permission. The captain shifted uncomfortably near the cockpit door, but said nothing. The hierarchy of silence was loud enough to hear. "Sir," the first officer pressed, louder now, her tone coated in false patience. "If you don't return to your seat, I'll have to call security." He still didn't move. His eyes drifted slowly across the cabin, the polished wood panels, the gold trim, the smug faces staring back at him. Every inch of this jet whispered exclusivity, the kind that money buys but character defines. Finally, he spoke. His voice was low, deliberate, and far steadier than the trembling authority confronting him. "Security," he said, "is already watching." The words hung in the air like smoke. A few passengers frowned, unsure what he meant. The first officer's cheeks flushed pink. "Excuse me?" He looked at her badge. "Captain Hayes, is it? Tell me, do you speak to all your passengers this way, or just the ones who look like me?" Someone coughed. Another shifted in their seat. The laughter was gone, now replaced by a hum of discomfort, the weight of realization pressing against polished luxury. Hayes tried to regain control. "Sir, this attitude isn't helping you. You need to step out of first class." He cut her off softly. "You're right about one thing, Captain. This isn't helping you." Her mouth opened, but no words came. Something in his tone, not anger, not threat, but certainty unsettled her. A woman across the aisle whispered, "Who is he?" The man's gaze didn't waver. "I asked you a question," he said. "Would you speak the same way if I were dressed in your uniform?" The captain looked toward the cockpit again, unsure if she wanted to intervene. The first officer's composure cracked. "Sir, please." "Please what?" he asked quietly. "Please forget what you just said. Pretend I didn't hear it." In my blestion Dave Frenny, he leaned forward just enough for the gold wings on her chest to glint under the cabin light. "The thing about belonging," he said, "is that the people who truly do never have to say it." A ripple passed through the room. The first officer's hand, still midpoint, trembled slightly before she lowered it. Her voice, smaller now, almost defensive. "You have no idea who I am." He smiled faintly. "Neither do you." The engines hummed louder, or maybe it was just the heartbeat of everyone listening. A flight attendant near the galley froze, tray in hand. The captain finally took a step forward, ready to diffuse whatever this was becoming. But the man, calm, composed, reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. His thumb moved once across the screen. The device gave a soft chime. He placed it face down on the armrest. "You sure you want to finish that sentence, Captain Hayes?" he asked quietly. Before she could respond, the intercom crackled overhead. "This is ground control," a voice said. "All operations for Flight 708 are temporarily suspended. Please stand by." Every head turned. Confusion rippled through the cabin. The first officer's face went pale. The man adjusted his cuffs, eyes still calm. "Now?" he said evenly. "Shall we start again professionally this time?" The camera lingered on his expression. No gloating, no rage, only control. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change, and we're glad you're here. Now, back to Elijah. For a moment, no one in the cabin dared to breathe. The announcement from ground control still echoed above them, mixing with the low, uneasy hum of the engines. The first officer blinked, her confidence unraveling. Suspended? What does that mean? Elijah didn't answer. He simply looked out the oval window, calm as a man who had already seen this scene play out 1,000 times. The captain finally stepped forward, voice tight with confusion. Sir, I need you to explain, did you contact ground control? Who gave you authorization to do that? Elijah turned back to her, the faintest hint of patience in his eyes. Authorization, he said quietly, usually comes from ownership. A murmur spread among the passengers. Phones came out. A woman whispered to her husband, Wait, did he just say ownership? The captain hesitated. Sir, with all due respect, that's impossible. Elijah tilted his head slightly, studying her, then smiled, not cruelly, but like a teacher watching a student realize the answer too late. That's what most people say, he replied. The first officer swallowed hard, her earlier arrogance replaced with something that looked a lot like fear. You can't just stop a flight, she stammered. Do you realize what kind of chaos that causes? I do, he said, still calm. That's why I'm usually careful who I trust with the cockpit. He stood then, slow, deliberate. His posture was straight, unhurried. And when he spoke again, the weight of every word filled the narrow cabin. Captain Hayes, he said, I'm Elijah Grant, founder and CEO of Aerostream Holdings. We own 41% of Atlantic Sky Airlines, the aircraft you're currently commanding. The captain froze. The first officer went pale. The passengers looked from one to another, disbelief turning to shock. Elijah continued, his tone even, his voice a measured instrument. I wasn't going to interfere with your flight today. I was here for a routine inspection, anonymous, quiet, to see how your crew treats passengers when they think no one is watching. A man near the aisle whispered, Oh my God. Elijah's eyes drifted to the first officer. But I suppose we've already learned that, haven't we? She opened her mouth to respond, but nothing came out. Every word she'd used against him, every assumption, every glare seemed to hang in the air between them like smoke that refused to clear. He took a step closer, voice low but sharp enough to slice through the silence. You looked at my skin, my clothes, and decided I didn't belong, that I must have made a mistake. But the only mistake here, Captain, is thinking professionalism, excuses, prejudice. No one spoke. The only sound was the steady thrum of the engines, waiting for orders that wouldn't come. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change, and we're glad you're here. Now, back to Elijah. Outside on the tarmac, airport staff were already reacting to the suspension notice. Messages flew through control towers and terminals. The name E. Grant in the system had triggered a corporate lockdown, a protocol that only the company's CEO could initiate. Inside the jet, Elijah turned slightly, addressing the passengers directly for the first time. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the delay. It appears we need to recalibrate our definition of service before takeoff. A few laughed nervously. Others lowered their phones, ashamed. He looked back to the captain. You'll contact your operations director. Tell them I'll be joining your debrief in person. The IFA piece is Lugal Wanhafer Khan. The captain nodded stiffly, voice barely a whisper. Yes, sir. Elijah's gaze softened, not forgiving, but resolute. You're a good pilot, he said quietly. But leadership isn't just about altitude, it's about attitude. The first officer's eyes glistened, her bravado gone. I didn't mean. You did, he interrupted gently. But meaning isn't the same as learning. Let's hope you'll do the second. He turned away, tapping his phone again. Instantly, the intercom chimed. Attention, crew. This is ground operations. Stand by for directives from corporate. All personnel are to remain on board. Whispers rippled through the cabin. The man in the navy suit who'd laughed earlier sank into his seat, pretending to read an in-flight magazine upside down. Elijah walked slowly back to his seat, unbothered, adjusting his cuffs like a man reclaiming his space not through anger, but through presence. He sat down, folded his hands, and gazed out the window again. 12 minutes, he murmured to himself. That's how long it takes for the truth to travel from the ground to the sky. Somewhere behind him, the first officer whispered. He grounded his own plane. And the passenger beside her replied softly, "No." He grounded arrogance. Outside, the engines idled a billion-dollar machine waiting for permission from the man it had just tried to humiliate. The camera lingered on his reflection in the window, calm, steady, powerful. Elijah Grant didn't need to shout to command the sky. He just had to remind everyone who it really belonged to. Elijah Grant sat perfectly still, eyes on the clouds outside the window as the flight crew whispered behind him. The first officer's voice cracked under the weight of panic. He can't really be. He is, the captain replied quietly. I just got confirmation from operations. Tension hung in the cabin like heavy smoke. The same passengers who'd laughed earlier now pretended not to exist. A man coughed into his hand. Another adjusted his tie. No one wanted to meet Elijah's eyes. 12 minutes ago, he had been invisible. Now, every breath in the room revolved around him. The truth had climbed the chain of command faster than any plane could take off. In the control tower, executives were scrambling. The company's intranet flashed red across multiple terminals. CEO Elijah Grant, onboard flight 708, suspended pending review. But Elijah wasn't thinking about the commotion below. His mind had gone somewhere else, back 20 years, to a night when he was just another passenger denied entry to a world he'd later own. He had been a young engineer then, working double shifts, saving every dollar to afford his first business trip. He remembered walking into an airport lounge and being stopped by a clerk who looked at his ticket, then at his face and said, "Maintenance is through that door, sir." He'd walked away that night not in shame, but in resolve. The system didn't need his anger. It needed his redesign. That redesign had become Aerostream Holdings, a global network spanning airlines, logistics, and aerospace engineering. He built it brick by brick, law by law, until the sky itself had to acknowledge his name. And yet, after all that, here he was still questioned, still doubted, by someone who thought authority came with a uniform. He looked up as the captain approached slowly, hat in hand. "Mr. Grant," she said, voice subdued, "I can't begin to express how sorry I am for what happened. We had no idea." He raised a hand, stopping her mid-sentence. "That's exactly the point, Captain. You shouldn't have to know who I am, to know how to treat me." Her lips parted, but no excuse came out. Just silence. He continued, his tone measured. "The culture in your cabin reflects the culture in your company, and culture always starts with leadership." Her eyes dropped to the floor. "Understood, sir." Elijah nodded once. "Then you'll understand why this flight won't be taking off until I've spoken with your director of operations." The captain hesitated. "That may take some time." "I have time," he said simply. He looked around the cabin once more. The passengers avoided his gaze, ashamed not by what they had said but by what they hadn't. The weight of complicity sat heavier than turbulence ever could. From the corner, a young flight attendant, barely in her 20s, stepped forward, her voice trembling. "Mr. Grant, I just wanted to say I'm sorry. I saw it happen and I didn't say anything. I should have." Elijah met her eyes. "Courage grows slow," he said softly, "but when it shows up, it changes everything." She nodded, tears welling. He turned back toward the window. Outside, ground crew vehicles circled the plane. The intercom clicked. "Attention crew. Please remain in standby. Corporate liaison en route." Inside, the air felt different now. Quieter, heavier, respectful. Elijah closed his eyes for a moment, not in exhaustion, but in reflection. "They still don't understand," he murmured. "This isn't about power. It's about proof that dignity can't be delayed, not even for takeoff." And with that, the man who owned the sky waited patiently, letting silence do what authority never could teach. The cabin door opened with a soft hiss. A new presence stepped in, a woman in a navy blue suit, tablet in hand, the company's crest pinned to her lapel. Her stride was steady, but her eyes betrayed urgency. "Mr. Grant," she said respectfully, "I'm Dana Lowell, corporate liaison for Atlantic Sky." Elijah looked up, calm but unyielding. "Miss Lowell," she took a quiet breath before continuing. "We've been briefed on the situation. The operations board sends their apologies. I understand you've grounded Flight 708. "I have," Elijah replied evenly. And it's going to stay that way until I'm certain every crew member understands what service actually means. Uning. Dana nodded, glancing nervously at the captain and first officer who stood a few paces behind her, stiff and pale. Of course, sir. We take this very seriously. The other passengers listened in uneasy silence, pretending to scroll through phones that had long since lost signal. The sound of the engines idling outside felt more like a heartbeat waiting for permission. Elijah folded his hands. Tell me, Miss Lowell, he began slowly, how many diversity and ethics training sessions has this airline conducted in the last year? She hesitated, caught off guard. I believe there were 3, sir. 3, he repeated, his tone neutral but the weight undeniable. And yet, here we are. Before she could answer, he continued, voice steady but sharp enough to cut through the corporate veneer. You see, Miss Lowell, you can't train out what you refuse to acknowledge. Bias isn't a technical malfunction, it's a moral one. And if left unchecked, it becomes policy. The captain flinched. The first officer looked ready to cry. Elijah leaned back in his seat. I built Aerostream to prove that equality and excellence could exist at 35,000 feet, not just in slogans, but in practice. And when one of our subsidiaries forgets that, it's my responsibility to remind them personally. A ripple of tension moved through the room. Dana swallowed. Understood, sir. Would you like to file an internal grievance? He almost smiled. You think this is about paperwork? Silence. Elijah stood, the light catching the silver at his temples. When I was a child, he said quietly, my grandmother used to tell me you teach people how to treat you, not by shouting, but by showing what you'll no longer tolerate. He looked straight at the captain. Captain Hayes, you're a skilled pilot. Your record shows that. But skill without respect is just noise with altitude. She nodded, eyes down. Yes, sir. You'll coordinate with HR for a reassignment. Temporary suspension, full review. Yes, sir. Elijah turned to the first officer. Her breathing was shallow. And you, he said, will take this as your lesson. I'm not firing you. Not yet. You'll undergo retraining every module, every case study, every live session. And when you're done, you'll deliver a presentation to the next generation of pilots about what you learned today. Her voice cracked. Yes, Mr. Grant. He nodded once, then faced Dana again. Ground crew can begin offboarding. This flight is canceled. Dana's fingers flew over her tablet. Understood. A wave of murmurs erupted among the passengers. Some groaned about missed meetings, others whispered apologies they should have offered earlier. One older man leaned forward. Mr. Grant, if I may, I just wanted to say, what happened was shameful. Thank you for addressing it. Elijah met his gaze. It's not about shame, it's about standard. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change, and we're glad you're here. Now, back to Elijah. On the tarmac below, the ripple effect had already begun. Corporate communications drafted a press statement. HR initiated a full review. The airline's stock briefly dipped before stabilizing under Aerostream's backing. Hashtags began to spread. Number grounded by grace, number fly with respect, propelled by a few passengers who had quietly recorded the confrontation. Inside the jet, Elijah remained composed, speaking softly with Dana. Every headline will focus on what happened in this cabin, he said. But what matters is what happens next. She nodded. Yes, sir. We'll ensure the report reflects that. Make sure it does, Elijah said. I don't need another PR apology. I need transformation. For a long moment, no one spoke. The jet, once a symbol of arrogance, had turned into a classroom. Every person inside, from captain to passenger, understood that they had witnessed something larger than one confrontation. They had seen accountability without anger, power without noise. Elijah looked toward the aisle, toward the young flight attendant who had spoken up earlier. What's your name? He asked. Naomi, sir. There is in tongue of the roading of the Akanagata products. And it's faster, Goddard. He nodded. Naomi, you'll join our leadership program at Aerostream. We could use people who still recognize right from wrong before someone tells them to. Her eyes widened. Sir, I thank you. He smiled faintly. Don't thank me. Earn it. Outside, the clouds began to thin as the sun broke through. its reflection gleaming off the aircraft's silver wings. Elijah adjusted his cuffs once more, then said quietly, almost to himself, "Let them see that justice can be silent, but never still." And with that, he stepped off the jet, leaving behind a cabin that would never forget the day. Power looked like patience, and humility looked like command. Outside, the cold wind carried whispers of what had just happened. The jet that once promised luxury now sat idle on the tarmac, grounded not by weather, not by mechanics, but by conscience. Inside the terminal, a growing crowd of passengers gathered near the glass, watching the aircraft that refused to move. Screens above their heads flashed delayed corporate hold. Nobody knew the details yet, but speculation was already spreading like wildfire. Elijah Grant walked through the terminal, surrounded by uneasy staff. His steps were unhurried, his composure unbroken. A few passengers recognized him from the cabin. Others simply felt the shift in the air, the unspoken awareness that someone important had just rewritten the rules. A young reporter from an aviation blog tried to approach him. "Mr. Grant, is it true you grounded the flight yourself?" He stopped, looked at her calmly, and replied, "No, I grounded behavior that shouldn't fly." The answer landed like thunder in the quiet hallway. Cameras clicked. Heads turned. He continued toward the executive lounge, his phone already buzzing with calls from board members. "Let it ring," he murmured to his assistant. "Some things are better explained face to face." As he entered the lounge, the view of the airfield stretched wide before him, rows of aircraft gleaming under a gray sky. Dana Lowell followed, still tense, tablet in hand. "Sir, PR is asking for a statement. The media is already picking it up. CNN wants to confirm if you really—" "I did," Elijah said simply, pouring himself a glass of water. "And we won't deny it. This isn't a scandal. It's a standard." Dana hesitated. "They'll want a quote." He looked up. "Then give them this. Respect isn't a perk of the ticket. It's the price of admission." She nodded, typing furiously. From across the room, another executive rushed in, pale, breathless. "Sir, headquarters is requesting clarification. The union might push back if—" Elijah cut him off gently. "If they do, remind them I started in the hangars. I've spent my life with the people who keep these planes in the sky. I'll never punish honest workers. But arrogance in uniform? That will land." The executive swallowed hard and nodded. "Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change, and we're glad you're here." Now, back to Elijah. Outside, the first officer and the captain sat in a side room with HR representatives. Through the glass, Elijah could see them silent, shaken. He didn't look at them with contempt, just clarity. He turned back to Dana. "We'll reroute affected passengers through Aerostream's network. Business class upgrades for all. Make the announcement within the hour." "Yes, sir," she replied, tapping on her tablet. Elijah nodded once, then looked out the window again. The jet remained still, a monument of pride interrupted. He spoke softly, more to himself than to anyone else. "You can't change an industry by building taller towers. You change it by building better ground." Dana looked up, unsure how to respond. Elijah finished his water, set the glass down carefully, and said, "Tell operations to resume the next flight. But not that one. Leave it parked." "Parked, sir?" "Yes," he said. "Let it sit there. A reminder that sometimes stopping is how you move forward." As he walked away, the sunlight broke through the clouds, illuminating the silent aircraft like a stage light on a lesson learned. And somewhere deep in the control tower, an operator whispered under his breath, "That man just grounded arrogance midair." He was right, and for the first time in years, the sky felt accountable. By sunset, Flight 708 had become more than a delay. It had become a message. Social media was on fire. Clips from inside the jet had already surfaced. The first officer pointing, the passengers laughing, Elijah's calm silence before the intercom crackled. Hashtags trended across continents, number grounded by grace, number Elijah Grant, number fly with respect. Every network wanted an interview. Every executive wanted a briefing. But Elijah Grant stayed quiet. He never answered the calls. He didn't need to. The silence was speaking for him. At Aerostream headquarters in New York, the boardroom glowed with cold blue light. News anchors' voices played from the giant screen. Sources confirm the passenger was Elijah Grant, the billionaire founder of Aerostream Holdings. The executives exchanged uneasy glances. Finally, the COO spoke. "We can't contain this anymore. Do we issue a press apology?" Elijah's voice echoed from the doorway before anyone noticed he'd entered. "We issue a correction," he said. The room fell silent. Every head turned. He walked in slowly. No entourage, no script, just the presence that had grounded a jet hours ago. "A correction?" the COO asked cautiously. Elijah placed his phone on the table. The live feed of Flight 708 filled the screen. The aircraft bathed in floodlights, still unmoved. "We're not apologizing for accountability," he said. "We're clarifying our expectations." He faced them one by one. Every passenger, every employee, every pilot treated with dignity. No exceptions. That's our new standard. And I'll repeat it as many times as I need until it's written into the company's DNA. A younger board member leaned forward. "Sir, the unions will say you acted unilaterally." "I did," Elijah replied calmly, "because leadership doesn't ask permission to do what's right." There was no arrogance in his tone, just quiet authority sharpened by experience. He gestured toward the screen again. "That plane stays grounded until we rebuild the culture that flies it. When it takes off again, it'll carry more than passengers. It'll carry proof." Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change, and we're glad you're here. Now, back to Elijah. Hours later, Elijah stepped out of the building and into the cool Manhattan night. The city buzzed below, unaware that an industry had just shifted course. He paused beside his car, gazing up at a billboard advertising luxury travel smiling models, champagne, clouds. Beneath the slogan, "Experience Excellence," he saw what had been missing all along: sincerity. He took out his phone and opened a note to himself. "Tomorrow, announce the Dignity Initiative, a training program for every partner airline, funded by Aerostream. Mandatory. Global." He saved it, then whispered under his breath, "Because equality shouldn't depend on altitude." As his driver opened the door, he glanced once more toward the sky. Planes carved silver lines across the dark, each one carrying stories, strangers, and choices. And somewhere among them, Flight 708 waited still grounded, still silent. A monument to the day a black CEO proved that leadership doesn't shout, it simply acts. By morning, the world had already taken sides. News anchors dissected every frame of the viral video. Some called Elijah Grant a visionary. Others said he overreacted. But beneath the noise, something deeper was stirring a conversation long overdue. At airports across the country, flight crews watched the footage during briefings. Some shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Others nodded, quiet, thoughtful. A single question echoed through every terminal. Would I have done the same? At Aerostream headquarters, Elijah walked into a studio for a pre-scheduled interview, not with a news network, but with Aerostream's internal communications team. His staff had begged him to speak publicly, to control the narrative. Elijah only agreed under one condition: that his message be sent directly to his employees first. He sat before the camera. No makeup, no stage lights, just truth. "I've seen the footage," he began, voice steady. "And I've read the comments. Some of you say I overstepped. Maybe I did. But if doing the right thing feels like too much, then what does just enough look like?" The room behind the glass went still. "I didn't ground a plane to make a statement," Elijah continued. "I grounded it because silence was costing us altitude. Every time we ignore prejudice in service, in boardrooms, in classrooms, we fall a little lower, even when the plane keeps flying." He leaned forward slightly, his eyes steady on the lens. "I built this company from nothing. I've sat in every seat: economy, business, and now the one where decisions get made. And the view hasn't changed. Respect is still the rarest currency in the sky." He paused, letting the words breathe. "So here's our new flight plan: mandatory empathy training, full cultural audits, and leadership accountability at every level. No one's exempt, not even me." The team behind the cameras exchanged glances. It wasn't a speech, it was a declaration. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, Hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change, and we're glad you're here. Now, back to Elijah. A week later, airports began displaying new signage under the Aerostream logo. Service begins with respect. The first officer who had shouted at Elijah, now suspended, watched the sign as she walked through the terminal for her hearing. For the first time, she didn't see a slogan. She saw herself. Inside the HR boardroom, Elijah didn't attend the meeting. He didn't need to. The system he built was already at work. But he did send a note, simple and handwritten. Growth isn't comfort, it's correction. Meanwhile, Naomi, the young attendant who had spoken up, received her official acceptance letter into Aerostream's leadership program. She stared at it through tears, whispering, "He kept his word." Across the world, pilots, crew members, and passengers alike shared their own stories, quiet moments of prejudice, of courage, of change. What started as one confrontation had become a movement. And through it all, Elijah stayed silent, letting his decisions speak. He didn't need the headlines. He had something rarer: impact. Because true power, he knew, was never about grounding planes. It was about lifting people. A month later, the ripple had become a wave. Across airports worldwide, the phrase "grounded by grace" was printed on banners, training manuals, and digital boards. It wasn't a marketing stunt, it was a reform. What had begun as one confrontation on Flight 708 had turned into a case study for corporate humanity. Inside Aerostream headquarters, an entire division now worked under a new branch, the Dignity Initiative. It was Elijah Grant's personal project, a global effort to rebuild how airlines trained, recruited, and rewarded their staff. The program didn't start with customer service. It started with empathy. Before you can serve the sky, Elijah told his team in a quiet meeting, you have to remember the people who walk beneath it. The first training session was live-streamed from New York. Elijah stood at the front of the stage. No spotlight, no teleprompter, just him. Hundreds of employees, from pilots to baggage handlers, watched in real time. He began simply, "I've spent 30 years chasing altitude, but altitude means nothing if you lose your humanity on the climb." The room was silent. He continued, his tone firm but intimate. "Somewhere along the way, we started believing that luxury meant hierarchy, that those who serve stand below those they serve. That's the lie I'm grounding today." The words landed with quiet force. Then Elijah called someone from the audience. "Naomi," he said, "come up here." The young flight attendant, once trembling at the back of a jet, stepped onto the stage. She looked nervous but resolute. Elijah placed a hand on her shoulder. "This," he said, "is leadership, not by title, but by courage." The moment she chose to speak, this company took its first real step forward. The crowd applauded. Naomi's eyes glistened. Elijah smiled faintly. "You can train for skill. You can't train for decency. But you can build a system that honors it." He turned to the audience again. "Every day you wear this uniform, remember you don't just represent a company, you represent a choice. The choice to be better than the world expects of you." Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change, and we're glad you're here. Now, back to Elijah. After the event, Elijah walked alone through the hangar where Aerostream's first aircraft was being restored. The faint smell of oil and metal filled the air, a reminder of where it all began. His old engineer's jacket still hung on the wall, stained from decades past. He smiled at it, a small, private memory resurfacing. Nights spent fixing what others had abandoned, believing he'd never belong until he built something no one could deny. A soft voice behind him broke the silence. "Mr. Grant?" It was Dana Lowell, the liaison from Flight 708. She stepped forward holding a folder. "I thought you'd want to see this." He opened it. Inside were hundreds of letters, handwritten, printed, emailed from passengers and employees across the world. Stories of apologies, reconciliations, and quiet changes. One note stood out, written in slanted blue ink. "I was on that flight. I laughed when they mocked you. I've replayed that moment every day since. I just wanted to say I'm sorry, and thank you for teaching me without shouting." Elijah closed the folder gently. "It's never about shouting," he said softly. "It's about showing." Dana smiled. "The press wants to name the next aircraft after you. The E. Grant." He shook his head. "No, Name it the horizon. Because that's what this is about, what comes next. Outside, the hangar doors opened, letting in a sweep of daylight that flooded across the floor. Dust motes danced in the sun, like fragments of old stories finally settling. Elijah watched the light stretch over the nose of the jet, its metal gleaming with new polish. You know, he said quietly, when they told me I didn't belong in first class, they were right because I never planned to fit in it. I planned to redefine it. Dana looked at him, speechless. He turned, walking toward the open air, the hum of engines faint in the distance. Tell them the sky's open again, he said. But this time, everyone flies with respect. It half-sea was a grove. The camera followed him as he stepped into the sunlight. No music, no applause, just the echo of footsteps fading beneath the roar of a departing plane. And for a moment it was clear, Elijah Grant hadn't just grounded a flight. He had grounded an era and taught the world how to rise differently. Weeks passed, and the story of Flight 708 began to fade from headlines but not from hearts. What remained wasn't the scandal, nor the outrage, but the quiet recalibration of how people saw one another at 35,000 feet. In airports from Johannesburg to Tokyo, flight attendants now greeted passengers with a subtle but powerful phrase that had replaced "Welcome aboard." Thank you for flying with respect. It wasn't policy, it was legacy. Elijah Grant never appeared on talk shows. He turned down magazine covers and late-night interviews, but his silence carried weight. Every airline that partnered with Aerostream quietly adopted the Dignity Initiative. Complaints of discriminatory incidents dropped by nearly 60% in 6 months. And for the first time in his long career, Elijah began taking the back seat, not in humility, but in peace. One quiet morning, he sat at a small coffee shop near JFK, alone except for the barista who recognized him. "Mr. Grant?" she said softly, almost unsure. I just wanted to say thank you. My dad's a mechanic at Atlantic Sky. He says things actually feel different now." Elijah smiled, stirring his coffee. "Then it was worth grounding a plane." The young woman laughed nervously. "I guess sometimes you have to stop to start again, huh?" He nodded. "Exactly." Outside, planes rose one after another, white streaks cutting across the dawn. He watched them silently, each one a symbol of progress that didn't need applause. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change, and we're glad you're here. Now, back to Elijah. Later that day, Elijah returned to Aerostream headquarters for one final meeting. The board had prepared a new proposal, an expansion plan to open a scholarship fund for underrepresented pilots and engineers. He signed the document, pen steady in hand, then placed it down. "Call it the Horizon Fund," he said. "Let every young dreamer who was ever told they don't belong know that they already do." The room fell silent. Even the hum of the air conditioner seemed to pause. Elijah rose, buttoned his jacket, and looked around the table. "The goal was never to own the sky," he said quietly. "It was to make sure no one gets turned away from it." As he stepped out onto the rooftop terrace, the late afternoon sun painted the skyline gold. Below, the city moved with its usual rhythm. Cars, people, possibilities. He took a deep breath, feeling the wind brush his face. Somewhere far off, a jet roared overhead. But this time, it didn't sound like arrogance. It sounded like redemption. Elijah smiled faintly. "Justice doesn't always land with noise," he murmured. "Sometimes, it lands with grace." And with that, the man who once grounded a plane to restore dignity closed his eyes, letting the sound of the sky remind him not of power, but of peace. Because in the end, true authority isn't measured by how high you can fly. It's measured by how gently you lift others with you.